Hey everybody! Ever noticed how the sun doesn't shine in the night? I mean, that might seem a little silly to say, but we all know where the sun doesn't shine. But that brings up that huge argument between solar and wind. When it comes to comparing green energy, there are so many factors and variables that need to be taken into account, and it's never as simple as which is better. On a global scale, it's relatively simple to look at the stats and compare. However, for a homeowner trying to decide between solar and wind, it can cause quite a headache trying to weigh the two options. So I thought I would have a little bit of a chat about that, so we get some idea of what those two options are and what's best. Now, on a large scale, I mean, there's no doubt that wind is far more efficient as a source of energy than solar. A wind turbine is cleaner than a solar panel, well, in terms of how much carbon dioxide is released on manufacture, and it can produce about 48,000 times the amount of energy per kilowatt hour than a solar panel can. The wind energy supplied 4% of the world's electricity needs, whereas solar provided just 0.5%, and the reason for that? Well, wind farms are built offshore. They generate huge amounts of power thanks to the strong and constant supply of wind. Solar panels, on the other hand, have a very limited time frame in which they can produce energy. Many countries are increasingly using wind energy as a major substitute for fossil fuels. The best example of this? Denmark. 42% of their electricity was generated by wind turbines, and currently there are no countries that use solar on that kind of scale. I mean, it's probably because of there's relatively little investment and research and development at this point. Having said that, of course, China has become a huge driver of solar energy after building the world's largest solar farm. It's 30 square kilometres and accounts for nearly half of the world's solar capacity, well, in 2016. Now, residential, it's pretty clear that wind power is easily more efficient as a power source, but it's not the clear favourite for high population areas. For starters, they're generally seen as an eyesore, and they're pretty noisy, and they are disruptive to nature and wildlife. Solar panels are far less conspicuous, require less space than wind turbines, and they don't make any noise. It's also generally assumed that a wind turbine will work well in windy areas, but of course that's not usually the case when it comes to urban areas. There needs to be a constant smooth flow of strong wind, which you don't get in a residential area thanks to trees, houses, cars, etc. You find that wind turbines are harder to install properly and require more maintenance as they suffer wear and tear. On the contrary, a solar panel, well, it's just put it in and forget about it, and it's predictable, more predictable than a wind turbine, and easier to install, and little maintenance once installed. The main benefit of wind is it's a 24/7. If there's wind, it's going to be generating. With solar, you have to have the sun, and the sun doesn't always shine. Now, at first sight, it might seem that I'm arguing, well, if you're going to use wind, you really ought to be a commercial operation, and if you want power in your residential, then solar's your option. But far from it. Wind is just so much more efficient. It's wind that I think we should be going for. I mean, yes, solar panels are getting more efficient, but you can't do anything about that. You can't work on it, you can't improve it, you can't do anything apart from wait for the latest one to come out and pay whatever ridiculous fee they want to charge you to be able to use it, because you can't make solar panels at home that are efficient and usable in any form whatsoever. There's a few kicking around about copper oxide, etc., but you just can't do it. You don't have the skills and the materials and the access needed to be able to make a solar panel unless you're a commercial operation. Wind, though, wind can be made by anybody at all, and that's what I think. I think that concentrating on the problems of urban wind, being able to make it yourself, is why wind is just so much more interesting than solar, and why I think wind is the way that the individual can approach power generation. Rather than just shelling out dollars, you can actually do something about it, and that's why I find it fascinating and important. Now, of course, Wind as it is currently generated is done via HAWTs. Those large horizontal wind turbines that look like aeroplane propellers. In urban environments, a far superior arrangement is VAWT, the vertical wind turbines that you see so often. Because vertical wind turbines can cope with winds coming from any direction. They can cope with buffeting winds, they can cope with changing winds. They don't have to be the massive installations, and you can make them so that they are protecting wildlife. We've done ones where we've reduced the noise of the turbine to next to nothing, and we've done ones where they're protective against wildlife. This is becoming far more important with places like Scarborough installing Darwin wind turbines for generation. So the movement to generation within urban environments with wind is one of those things that is gaining speed and moving it away from commercial to residential. Those things are what I think is important, because the technology behind wind is already developed and accessible. The technology behind solar, well, we can't access it. We can't, development is a bit slow, and it is gonna be expensive. So it comes down to one of two things when you're choosing between solar and wind. If you want to investigate, stand by yourself, make it yourself, work on it yourself, look after it, and be free of the man, wind is your way to go. If you don't feel like doing anything and you just want to stick something up and leave it alone and forget about it, and you're quite happy to shell out the dollars and pay whatever price you're asked for, go for solar. It might seem that I'm dumping on solar as the lazy man's option. Far from it. There's a lot to be said for a ready-made install. If you lead a very busy life in other directions and all you really want is something that will produce your power and you can forget about it, then solar's brilliant. Maybe I'm a bit more of a hands-on practical kind of guy, and wind is more efficient, so I'm more inclined to that. And it's like so many things when you ask which is better. Truth is, what is better comes down to the individual, their circumstances, their choices, where they live, how they live, far more than the mechanism of the generation in and of itself. And that's the whole issue here. Whether it's an argument between VAWT, HAWT, an argument between solar or wind, always comes down to the same thing. It actually really depends. So if you're asking which is better, then you really need to be asking what suits my lifestyle. When you know what suits your lifestyle, you really have your answer. Anyway, this was a little bit of a rant, I guess, but thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please do remember to like and subscribe.